Nick, so good to be chatting with you today, man. We've known each other for a while. We've been grinding it out in startup sales for a while. So I'm really excited to get into the weeds with you on some of this stuff. So you started ToutApp as an SDR, get promoted to AE. Then, as we know, the ABM craze takes over the universe, right? Funnels on funnels. Yeah. And by the way, monthly quotas there, and which is something we're going to dig into a little bit more. And then you couldn't get enough of ABM, so you went to Bright Funnel. So you go deeper into the MarTech, one of the most competitive arenas to sell in, by the way. So I don't know why you were doing this to yourself, but I respect it. And then finally, I think you came to your senses and switched verticals, right? You were like, okay, enough of this MarTech stuff. And then you went to Lilt. And that was your first official leadership role. And then most recently, you joined MURAL. And then you joined it as a manager, got promoted to director in less than 4 months. What was the last round that MURAL raised again?
Series B, 118 million. Yeah. Inside partners, they got some money.
Would you say that, Jason Lemkin always talks about the COVID beneficiaries. Would you say MURAL is like a pretty big beneficiary of what's happened this year?
I mean, 100%. I think like when you think about digital collaboration, I mean, that's what we say we are, but people are like, what does that even really mean? I think the problem today, when you think about people that are remote, you think about this, right? You think about Zoom calls, you think about Slack, you think about email, but I think what's missing is this imagination aspect. You think about like a head of design who's leading a sprint with a new product feature, like how are they supposed to collaborate? Or a CRO, right? If they're leading a big strategy workshop for their leadership team, what are they supposed to do while they're remote? And I think that's what's been missing is this whole like visual thinking and remote collaboration aspect of going mainstream. And now you see these deals, we're working some 7-figure deals that are being closed over Zoom. It's pretty crazy how this has become such a transformation of how not only you sell, but how you think about a sales motion in general, or any motion for that matter. So I do find that this digital craze, I'll just say I joined at the right time. It was all luck.
All right. I think you're being pretty humble there, but we can move on. So how did you get into sales?
I was born with a sales nod. God, I mean, look, sales, I've always been passionate about people. And, I was a journalism major. I think back in the day, I wanted to probably be on TV and look all pretty and talk to people. And that was kind of my end all goal. But I love sales. It's a grind. It's like, it never ends. It's constant pressure. And I think what I love about it is you can always better your craft. And I think there's not a lot of professions out there where you're able to do that and you're able to actually have ownership of where you challenge yourself. So I think what's cool is, I've jumped around a bit earlier in my career when I was an individual contributor, but I was able to sell multiple products to multiple different, buyers. And I learned a lot, right? So I love the aspect of control on how you can really challenge yourself.
It's interesting you talk about control, because I was talking to Matt Marshall from Spiff, and one of the things he said is one of the biggest challenges from moving from an IC role to management is you have to surrender a lot of control, because you don't want to be a micromanager, right? Otherwise, no one's going to want to work for you. But the people that know you well, they know that you're big into fitness, right? And you got your intro in sales. Am I right to say that it was like fitness related?
Yeah, oh, totally. I mean, my family's in fitness. So when I graduated from college, I came home, lived with my parents, classic, and got into membership sales at Crunch Fitness, which was a grind, let me tell you. Trying to sell memberships to the white privilege is always super fun. They're the cheapest of them all, to be honest. But that's where I learned not only how to sell, but just like how to get comfortable connecting with people. And you learn simple things like posture, how to look into people's eyes, and how to think about how to actually sell to a human and rather than selling a service. So that's where I started, was selling memberships. And then all my friends were getting into tech, making, double what I was making. And of course, we're all money hungry. So I said, look, let's do it. This is a cool thing to do. And that's where I stumbled into ToutApp, which at the time, I think I was like the 9th employee there, which I thought was, a huge company. Little did I know it was a startup. And that's kind of where I began my startup junkie phase.
So the interesting thing about you is not only are you managing a team at MURAL, you're under pressure, delivering every month, but on top of that, or at least before COVID, you were doing some instructing over at Barry's Bootcamp, right? Which is really interesting to me. And the reason it's interesting is because it's clear that you have a desire to motivate people. And I'm just curious, where do you think that comes from?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. So I'm hiring for some managers on my team, and the reason why I'm sharing the story is because I look for someone that wants to lead and not someone that just wants to manage. Because I think those are two very different things that need to be delineated, right? Like when you think about leadership, it's people want to follow that person. People are motivated. They're inspired by that individual. And management is different. It's having more control over someone or control over a process. That's the way I think about it. So for me, I've loved leading only because I find that if I can inspire someone, and this sounds so corny, but if I can just influence one person, that's exciting for me. And I knew the moment I wanted to step into management was the moment when my peer had closed a deal that I had supported. And I was so excited compared to the deal that I was closing. And I was like, maybe this is what I want to get into. Maybe I do find more passion in other people succeeding. Granted, we're all vain and we're all selfish to some degree, but I think, professionally, I find a lot of excitement leading and motivating. And I've always, like I said, had a fitness background. So I think I was like, hey, how do I double down on this? And also just so I don't, yell and scream at my team every day, I need to yell and scream at people to do burpees.
Have you ever had a prospect show up at a Bears bootcamp class or what?
Yeah, I have actually. A little did I know, because people's LinkedIn profiles look a little bit different than they do in person. But yeah, I've had a lot of people come to the marina in San Francisco that I've sold to. I've even actually, funny story, I've closed a deal for one of my reps in person after a Barry's class. They came up to me and said how great the respective rep was. And they actually brought the paperwork with them and signed the deal right then and there. And we took a photo and sent it to the rep.
That's awesome. Okay. So you mentioned earlier on your career, you were experimenting with different companies, selling different products. And one of the valuable things from that is you've seen different leadership teams. You've done your due diligence on multiple startups before joining. If you were to give advice to someone early in their career in sales, they want to join a startup, what are the things that they should be evaluating a startup on before joining?
That's a good question that I probably should get some feedback on as well. But for me, I think it's all about the people and the culture more than anything. I think earlier in my career, I made some mistakes on just focusing on title, right? Where can I get the best title, or where can I get the best pay? But in all reality, it's the people that you're with, right? Because you're working with them day in and day out. If you're not inspired by that, or if you're working with folks that don't work at the same pace as you do, you're not going to enjoy your day-to-day, regardless of what you're getting paid, or regardless of what the title is. I think for me, I try to focus mostly on the founders. I've learned in my career that it makes sense to work for a company with multiple founders, not just one, for the direction of the company and the future of the business. A founder that is both technical and also one that is more business savvy, because you definitely need both. You can't just have one. And I think when I think about a founder or a business, I want to work for a founder that's an absolute savage. Because if you're a founder, you've got to have some level of insanity, right? Because all founders to me have that, innately inside them. And that's why they're able to drive a business and sleep 2 hours a night and, get things done. But when you think about a startup, you definitely need to join if you want to be challenged. If you don't want to be challenged, if you're not here for the chaos and the uncertainty and the constant ebbs and flows of the business, don't join. If you want to be comfortable with failure and getting uncomfortable and stepping outside your regular day-to-day responsibilities, a startup's for you. But if you're more, I don't want to say passive, but if you're comfortable with, structure and process, I would definitely not join a startup.
Good advice. So another thing that's interesting about your experience is you're out of the people that I know, you might have the most amount of experience with monthly quotas than anyone I've ever met before.
Not something to be proud of, that's for sure.
So obviously there's pros and cons. The board probably loves it because they're like, oh, every month, this is the target. This is the target. We're driving towards that. And it's a forcing function for a lot of reps to act in the right way for the business, so to speak. But I'm just curious, when is it good to have a monthly quota versus a quarterly? Like, what are your thoughts on that? Because I'm sure at some of the companies you've been at, it's been the right model. Maybe at others, it wasn't. I just want to get your thoughts on how you can pick between quarterly versus monthly and what aspects you look for.
Yeah. For sanity purposes, never good for monthly. But yeah, I don't know if you know who Bill Vecti is. He was a former SVP at Microsoft and COO at HP. He's one of our investors, and he's really big on this velocity type of emotion where you're moving quickly. And when you think velocity, you think monthly quotas, which I do like because you're constantly under pressure, right? Like I said earlier, I think like being challenged. If you want that, grab a monthly quota. You and I did that at Engagio, which was super fun. But I think for monthly quotas, it makes sense depending on the sales motion. Like if your average sales cycle length is under 25 days, do it. SMB, growth, commercial, whatever nomenclature you want to use, those motions make sense for a monthly quota. I think it helps drive more revenue because it lights a fire under the rep's ass, right? I think it pushes your people. There's constant pressure. And candidly, I do think, and it's done this for me with my team, it really weeds out, I hate to say this, but it weeds out the weak, people that don't want to grind and that are not comfortable with the constant pressure. But the problem is you can get burnout, right? Like I see it across my team today. I see it across myself. Monthly quotas, you've got 12, end of year closes because it's all year long. And I think obviously quarterly, in my opinion, yes, I would love it. I think there's less pressure, not only on your team, but also less pressure on your customers. I think the conversations are more fluid because you're not forcing your customers to a quick date after a conversation. But I do think that even though that sell for a quarterly motion is a little bit more consultative, I find that reps are definitely slacking more, in my opinion, when they have a quarterly quota versus a monthly.
So is there a specific metric then that people should consider? So you said deal size or sales cycle under 30 days, that would make sense. But what about in deal size, around 30K or under?
Yeah, it's tough to say. I think whenever I look at metrics or decisions, I try simplicity is the best way to do it. Look at one metric. And to me, I think it's the sales cycle length. Anything under 30 days, you should be having a monthly quota. And I think each business should have, different motions. Like we have our velocity motion at MURAL. We have what we call a transformation motion, which is more of like a land and expand into larger Fortune 100 companies. And then we have a strategic team, which is a part of that transformation motion. But you should have two areas of the business, one that's moving a lot faster than the other. Because I think if our team today wasn't moving at the pace that they are to land, we land usually around 150 to 200 deals a month. And those deals get graduated or promoted, if you will, to the major strategic team. We wouldn't be closing as much business, right? We wouldn't have this land and expand model if we were not monthly. And I think we can attest a lot of our revenue to the pace that we move at.
That's really interesting. I don't think I've ever seen that model before. So you have one team that's focused on velocity, closing deals as quickly as possible, and then they pass it off to the more strategic reps, and then those reps have a quarterly quota?
Yep.
Man, that's actually pretty cool.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, if you look at Asana, you look at Atlassian, you look at some of these companies, very similar model where, this velocity, commercial growth, whatever team you want to call it, still working with enterprise customers, right? Like companies that are over 5,000 at least. You land them, you land a Coca-Cola, for, let's just say, whatever model you sell, whether it's memberships, whether it's, services fees, you land that deal. And then what do you do to expand, to grow, to build a relationship? I like the fact that we have two different sellers, two different motions, two different methodologies even of how to grow a business. Like one team, 99% of the business is focused on lands. That other 1% is really, maybe net new lands, but 99% growth and expansion.
Yeah, because the challenge with having the same person do it all, and I experienced this on our team, is they're trying to maximize that initial sale and lengthen the sales cycle inevitably, right? I mean, I like what you guys are doing there. So, okay, so you went from individual contributor to leadership at Tilt. What's the biggest mindset shift that you had to make moving from an AE role at BrightFunnel to your first management role at Lilt?
Yeah, that's tough. I think like everyone sells a certain way, right? And I think just because you're selling a certain way, you're used to a certain motion, you communicate with a client a certain way, you answer emails a certain way, it doesn't mean that everyone should do that. And that's the control piece that I had to let go of. I think like I struggled with trying to understand my people when I first started, of really understanding them more than they understood themselves, right? Like how they should be running a deal. How do I motivate them? How do I push them in a way that, I think might be right, but they have a different way of learning and working. And I think like the biggest thing for me, I always tell my team, like I am working for you guys. It's not the other way around, but I know about myself. I'm really impatient and I lack a lot of tolerance. So I needed to be better at understanding like, how can I support my team a little bit better? How do I figure out what pace works for them? And, earlier in my management career, if you will, I learned that, not everyone will take feedback the same way and you have to adapt. And this is a relationship, right? And I think like people understand and listen and comprehend from people, if that makes sense. Like I try to not operate as a manager. I try to operate as a peer to them and speak to them like they're humans. And I think really understanding that relationship aspect was something that I had to drill a little bit more into. Also finding that fine line of like, you're not friends with your people. There has to be a line of authority that is drawn in the sand, and you need to find the right balance of trust, authority, and overall responsibility with your team.
How do you run your one-on-ones now? I mean, the thing that I love about your experience is, again, you have a lot of IC experience and now you're in leadership. You've experienced good management, bad management. What's your takeaway from running a good one-on-one with your reps? Because sometimes what I've noticed is it's the manager essentially just asking for updates the whole time, right? When is this coming in? Is that still committed? How do you balance staying on top of the number and making sure that your reps' commitments are still solid versus this nurturing thing during the one-on-ones?
Yeah, I mean, we usually just do burpees in the one-on-one and that's about it. No, I think like what I've learned probably most in this role is forecasting. It's less about me going into every single deal. Like you do have to put trust in your reps once they've earned it. But for me, we go to the meeting really prepared. Like you come with a forecast, an upside in the best case for the week and for the month, especially with the velocity motion. I need to know what deal is coming in that day. Each rep is measured on 16 lands a month. So they need to be closing 16 in total, which is pretty much 1.3 deals a day, which is a lot, right? So across my team, there's about 400 to 500 opportunities that I like need to have a really good pulse on, which is just impossible. So like we come into the meeting, what is your forecast? What can you commit to for the month and the week? What is your upside? What do you think is going to happen? Where do you think you're going to land? And what's your best case? We'll go through those. And we talk about deals that are at risk. Like, what can I do to help you? I don't need an update that the PO is out. You've got everything going here. It's signed. Where can I help you? And the meeting is for them. The first part is for me to understand, of course, the number, but the meeting is for them, right? Like, how do you guys want to run this meeting? I won't show up to a one-on-one if there's no agenda. has to have an agenda before every single meeting because like time is precious. Like the 14-hour days are insane, and I need to make sure that you are using this time wisely, or I'll take the time back. And I think putting that pressure on the one-on-one, make sure that we're not wasting our time. Like we've all been in one-on-ones where it's like, this is a complete waste of my time. And then I find that the rep, I used to do this, I lost some trust and excitement and really felt that I wasn't learning from my leader anymore just based on the experience I had in my one-on-ones. So I take those as seriously as I can. And what I do is for every month, 3 of the one-on-ones are going to be focused on the forecast, the deals, you name it. One-on-one a month, which is usually the first week of the month. We focus on progression with your career. We focus on, what do you want to talk about outside of the company? And let's make this more about you and less about what you're going to do for the business. Because I think when you have 4 a month and you're just focusing on the pipeline and the number and the revenue they're bringing in, that also can cause burnout. And people want to know that their leader is focused on up-leveling their career in some way, shape, or form. And I think that is the most impactful component for my team and really learnings from me about where my folks want to be.
So you hit on a topic that I wasn't planning on discussing with you, but I want to get your take on, which is career paths, promotions within sales, right? I'm still new to leadership, so I still struggle with this, but like, what's your approach for setting a clear pathway internally? Are you very transparent about what a rep needs to do in order to be considered for a promotion? Is that documented somewhere in like a company wiki? Tell me about how you set those standards for people and some of the lessons you've learned going through that.
Yeah, it's tough. I think it's opt-in. Like I need to make sure that if I'm going to put in the time and the effort, that the individual is also doing the same, right? So we'll use MURAL to go through a lot of these. We'll put a canvas together of like, hey, what are you focused on? Where do you want to be? Let's talk about improvements. Let's talk about what our goals are for the quarter, right? And we'll constantly look back at that every single month. And so everything is documented. But I think, you and I both know progression within a company is only possible if the role is available. And so I think I like to set the stage, especially for, AEs that want to move up, right? Whether it's management or to more strategic opportunities. It doesn't matter if you hit your number every single month and you do everything both quantitatively and qualitatively to get there. If that position is not available, a lot of the times you can't create it. Now, I'm fortunate to work for a company that has a lot of opportunities. So I've been able to promote a lot of reps. I did not have that opportunity at my prior role. And so I think what happens is I have made a mistake before in which you overpromise and underdeliver. And I think as long as you show the initiative that you are thinking about this, that you care, and I'd like to give proof. Like I will send notes, put my reps on BCC to my manager, highlighting the success of that individual, showing or giving insight to someone that is more curious about the business, leadership metrics and meetings that we've had over the past week so they can get more insight. And you really got to figure out and do your own discovery with each of your reps to figure out exactly what they want and what's important to them. Do they want to be highlighted to the company? Do they need that affirmation? Do they want more projects? Everyone's different. So not being assumptive is something that I try to lean on.
I love the BCC tactic there. I might steal that one from you. So what roles are you hiring for right now?
All across the board. AEs, team leads, managers. I need it all right now.
So what are some of the basic things you look for when bringing on AEs? Do you anchor do you index pretty hard on their past performance, like quantitative stuff? Or is that just one of the things you look at holistically? Because one of the things that I've noticed is hitting 120% at one company could be much easier than hitting 30% at another. So how are you thinking about judging their past performance when you're bringing them on?
Yeah, that's spot on. I mean, look, we're all going to look at past performance. Like I'll take a look at the resume, but you never know. Reps lie all the time, right? I've lied on a resume. Everyone does it. But I think,
show me your W-2 right now.
Come on. This sounds so cliche, but for me, it's like, it's all about the skills and qualities that I look at, because skills and qualities are very different. And I think delineating those two is tough for people. Like I need someone that can hustle, and trying to prove that in an interview is really tough, right? Like I hate the questions like, walk me through a time you did this, like, no, I need to know that they take initiative. I need to know that they have speed more than anything, because I need someone that is not only quick, but also meticulous. Can you move at a pace where you're handling 40 opportunities in a month, but you're also really meticulous where you're going to spell your name correctly in the email, right? Like,
yeah, you can't be sloppy.
And I think the other part is like humility. People just don't have it. And I think it's really tough to build a culture when you have a couple rotten eggs. Like one person can affect an entire team. So like my biggest thing is like no egos, no bullshit. Like that is the most important part, because if you have a strong team that's willing to help each other, it doesn't matter how many years of experience that rep has. If you've got people that are surrounded and corralling around you to support you, that to me is more important than anything.
Speaking of no egos, this is on my table right now. This is required reading for everybody on my team.
Love that.
Love me some Ryan Holiday. Have you ever had to let a high performing rep go because they didn't do well on the latter part of what you're talking about?
That's a good question. Short answer is no, but I have put high performing reps on what I call not performance plans, but progression plans. Because just because you're a high performer every single month does not mean that you have the qualitative skills to not only better yourself, but better the team. Like I don't do well with complaining. I don't do well with bringing issues with no solution. Like if you've got an issue, you need to solve for it, or you need to come to me with a recommended solution, or I don't want to hear it. And that might be too hard, but like we're not coddling children here. Like we are grown ass adults, right? And this is a job. And I think people forget that sometimes. It's a lot of woe is me, or this is what I did when I worked at, SAP or Google. This isn't Google. So you need to come in and take some responsibility. And I think when you set that fine line, it sets the tone for the culture. And like that to me is important. But to your question, I'm like going around it. Yes. Trying to measure someone qualitatively is really tough. So like I try to do this progression plan where it's like, hey, look, you're focused on bettering your email communication when it comes to internal conversations, being more open when it comes to feedback, or working with your peers to help get them to a position where you are, quantitatively, but you need to show some humility and get to a point where I can continue working with you. So you're not that, rotten egg, if you will.
Damn, playing no games. I like it, man. All right. So obviously you're crushing it at the gym, doing the Barry's boot camp stuff, but let's talk about staying mentally sharp. What are you doing on that front? I mean, is there any like
lots of therapy? Lots of therapy.
But in all seriousness, are there any new books that you're reading? Are you a big meditation guy? Like walk us through that routine.
Yeah. I mean, I've never been one for meditation. I just haven't. I'll be honest. I probably should be, and I should be promoting that because I'm all about mental health and physical health. I think for me, like physical health is synonymous with mental health. And that's just my opinion. Like, don't come for me, people. But I think when I work out, when I'm active, mentally, I'm in a better place. And this sounds like, so I guess wild and corny as well, but like when I have a really thoughtful conversation with someone on my team about performance, or like when they learn something, like to me, that like really stimulates me mentally. I love those conversations. That one-on-one that I have with them every month about career growth. And like, when you can just see something kind of like hits and sparks, that drives my mental health, which is like, I don't know, sounds really cliche, but I try to do more reading. I think like it is tough to find the time, in my opinion. I just like really have to get in the right mindset for reading. Billion Dollar Loser is a book I'm reading right now about the CEO of WeWork and kind of that entire process, and how he came to immense success and really how he failed. And it is interesting. It allows for a lot of introspection for me personally, but mental health is therapy. Simple.
That the CEO of WeWork, Adam Newman, right? Is it Adam Newman? Hell of a salesperson, by the way.
Scary.
Yeah. We gotta up our games. Well, it's been a pleasure talking to you. I'm really excited to see you build the team out at MURAL. I mean, you just look like you're really starting to take off. And if there's ever anything I can help you out with, reach out. But I'm rooting for you, man.
Hey, you got to fake it till you make it,
All right, buddy. Talk to you soon.
All right. See ya.